Everyone, this is Eric Chabot here. I am the director of Ratio Christi Student Apologetics Alliance at The Ohio State University, which is one of the largest college campuses of the entire nation. So today I want to talk a little bit about the issue of what we can know about Jesus. Now, I think for most of us, when we attend a church on a Sunday or just about anywhere we go in a local congregation, there's just a tendency to open up the Bible and read from the Bible or the New Testament and talk about Jesus. And we generally accept the Bible as an authoritative source for us. It's inspired and authoritative. But when you come on a college campus like Ohio State, they have a lot of questions or objections to the Bible or what we can really know about Jesus of Nazareth. Now, when it comes to studying the person of Jesus of Nazareth, we're talking about a person that is in the past. And so what that means is that we do not have what's called direct evidence. Direct evidence is something that we directly saw or participated in. Many of the events in history are in the past, and none of us were there to directly participate in them. So it's not just that is with Jesus that we don't have direct evidence. We don't have direct evidence with many things in antiquity or in history. Do you know that we don't have direct evidence for many things in science as well? We weren't there to participate in the beginning of the universe. We weren't there to see how life got going. That's why we're still working in this scientific endeavor to figure out what happened, right? That's part of science, to study the past and come up with explanations today. Another thing where direct evidence comes into play is the issues of criminal investigations. Now, just like every detective that's out there, they can tell you where they're called into a crime scene and they're gonna see a body there laying on the floor that's dead. They weren't there to see what happened, right? They didn't see the murder, and they're trying to put together an investigation and come up with all the available evidence, and then they're gonna present it in a court of law, and they're gonna come up with a conclusion or a verdict about what happened to that body. So the point is that we don't have direct evidence with a lot of things, okay? And we rely on what is called circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is used in criminal investigations, and it's also used in history and in science as well. And in circumstantial evidence, we try to come up with an inference to the best explanation and this will explain all the evidence that we have, and the wide range of possibilities to come up with the best explanation. So, having said that, where do we start in looking at the person of Jesus of Nazareth? Well, just like any historian, they're going to rely on what is called written documents. They're going to rely on the testimony of witnesses. They're going to rely on archaeological data, and they're going to rely on what's called historical causation, which means they're going to ask, what is the best explanation that caused the birth of the Jesus movement? Therefore, what are the factors that led to the birth of this new movement in the first century? So just as historians rely on those things, that's what we have to do with the person of Jesus. So when it comes to written sources, one of the earliest sources we have for Jesus is Paul. Paul was an early persecutor of the early Christian community, but his letters are the earliest sources we have for what we can know about Jesus. Now remember, Paul's letters are not biographies like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're written to various congregations addressing doctrinal issues, but they do contain historical information about what we can know about Jesus. And then we have the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are four biographies. With Matthew and John, they are a form of direct eyewitnesses, and with Luke and Mark, those are indirect eyewitnesses. For example, like in Luke chapter 1, Luke says, I got this information from direct witnesses, I compiled it, and I'm giving it to you. That's okay, because direct and indirect witnesses are reliable forms of what we can know in historical matters. So it doesn't matter whether it's direct or indirect. And then we have plenty of archaeological confirmation for what happened in the New Testament. They have found many things such as the Pilate inscription, which is a piece of archaeological data that confirms that Pilate was the real person in the New Testament we read about that actually was involved in Jesus' crucifixion. We have what's called the Caiaphas ossuary, which contains the bones of Caiaphas, who was the high priest in Mark chapter 14 and carrying out Jesus' sentence there. And we have a wealth of other archaeological confirmation. I can't go into that all right now. And then when it comes to historical causation, we do have good reasons to believe that the resurrection helps explain why the birth of this Jesus movement took place and why it maintained its existence after Jesus died. And so these are some of the things we have to evaluate when we talk about what we can know about Jesus. Now, one last thing I want to mention is that we also have what's called oral tradition or oral memory, and that means that we have an entire oral layer before the written Gospels are put into writing. And so that means that Jesus committed what he said to his followers in an oral manner, but we can study the Jewish culture at that time and we can see that what he said was reliable and that they had every reason to record what he said with accuracy. So these are some of the things we need to take into consideration when studying the person of Jesus. There are resources out there, and we are one of them here at The Ohio State University. We're called Ratio Christi Student Apologetics Alliance. We are here for you to help learn about what we can know about Jesus. Thank you.